In Florida, a Florida resource officer will not face any additional criminal charges for slamming a high school student to the ground, rendering her unconscious. This is a viral video that went out that showed an officer attacking Taylor Bracey in January. Bracey's mother says her daughter still suffers from sleeping issues and mental loss from the encounter. State Attorney Monique Worrell says the officers' actions were disturbing but not illegal. Parents are calling for the removal of school resource officers and policy changes. We have seen this routinely, Jason, in these school systems where the actions of these resource officers. We've seen this happen numerous times, and I got to tell you, it is troubling, to be honest, to keep seeing these sort of outlandish cops and their actions in schools. That's not, to me, how you should be dealing with students.
Absolutely. I think there definitely needs to be police reform, not only on the streets, but certainly in the schools. I think a lot of schools don't need a police officer. Maybe perhaps some do. I've had students who have told me that they actually felt safer with the school resource officer there. So I don't want to completely downplay what some of my young Black students have actually said, that in terms of it making them feel safe. But we've seen a lot of situations where particularly young Black girls are being manhandled, and that's not acceptable. I'm glad that these parents are standing up, and it's time that we start to implement some reforms, not just on the streets, but also certainly in a place where our young people are vulnerable, and that's in school. And school certainly should not feel like a prison. So there are a lot of reforms that I think need to happen in a lot of schools around the country.
Brittany?
Yeah, I think this is absolutely ridiculous. I think it demonstrates further the school to prison pipeline. At the end of the day, there may be behavioral issues in classrooms. I was a school teacher in a Title I school for multiple years. These are children, and these kids are still developing. So in my opinion, police have absolutely no place inside of the school system. I think their presence does reinforce the idea that they are not in school, but they are in prisons, because most of these predominantly white schools do not have police officers walking around. But what I can tell you is that the majority of these predominantly white schools have counselors, nurses, school psychologists, and social workers. And we can just look, 1.7 million students, 1.7 million students are in schools with cops and no counselors. 3 million students are in schools with cops and no nurses. 6 million are in schools with cops and no school psychologists. 10 million with cops and no social workers. So I always think this goes back to why there's a quote unquote behavior in the first place. If you look at children as human beings holistically, especially our Black children, and you don't contextualize maybe why they're quote unquote acting out, and instead you're manhandling them, potentially causing lifelong injuries, creating yet more trauma, we are doing our kids a disservice. So not only am I for policing outside of the school, I'm policing writ large. Gotta
go. It's also a matter, Kelly, of, again, I would think that your job as a school resource officer, like cops on the streets, is to de-escalate. What we often see is escalation.
Absolutely. Not only to de-escalate the situation, but considering that you are in a school setting. To piggyback off of what Brittany was saying, these are children, period. They are minors, they are adolescents, they are children. And for these officers to basically dissociate themselves from the humanity of Black children is really just evil to me. I would assume that these officers, I don't know about this officer, but I would assume that a lot of these officers have children of their own, or certainly they know people with children. I'm sure they wouldn't want to see their child in that situation. I'm sure they wouldn't want some other resource officer manhandling a young girl, their young girl, and body slamming her to the ground. And there's also something to be said about, just as a whole, the expedited rate of, like, the perception that Black girls are more mature and more advanced and more adult-like than their counterparts of the same age. And there are studies on it and the like, but Black girls are still girls. They're still children and they should be treated as such. So this officer was in the wrong on several fronts. As far as, whether they need to be in schools or not, again, I'm split on the issue because I know students, like what Jason said, who feel safer around them. I also know of situations like what Brittany said where they don't need to be there at all. But at the end of the day, this officer, regardless of whether you feel like he was supposed to be there or not, simply did not do his job of de-escalating a situation.
All right, folks. Again, it's crazy to see, I think, what happens when you talk about these resource officers and how they behave in the schools. We remember what took place in South Carolina when the young girl was body slammed out of her desk. I mean, that's just absolutely crazy and outlandish. And so it is sad as well. Back to that Roland Mark Unfiltered video in just one moment.
Football bands and one of the best fan experiences in the country. The Cricket BX SWAC Challenge kickoff returns to Atlanta on August 28th, along with special guests, College Game Day. Then Alcorn State takes on North Carolina Central with conference bragging rights on the line. Center Park Stadium is the place to be on August 28th. Come tailgate all day before enjoying a primetime matchup on the gridiron. You don't want to miss this. Check out MEACSWACChallenge.com for more information.
Don't forget, folks, Roland Martin Unfiltered is going to be broadcasting live from Atlanta on Friday and Saturday. Friday will be at the Atlanta Braves Stadium, talking to the presidents of both universities, as well as officials with the SWAC and MEAC. Then on Saturday, we'll be at the Coca-Cola Fan Zone, broadcasting live from that particular afternoon. And then, of course, we'll be live streaming the halftime show and the concert taking place after the game. You can watch it at 7 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. And we appreciate it in partnership with Coca-Cola of making this happen. See you next week.